Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and share this event with Facebook. I'll give people a few minutes to hop on. I'm going to show some videos at the start, and then from there, we'll come back and we'll go into the interview. Okay, we are live. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. I like to give people a chance to hop on, and then I go ahead and I share this episode with the rest of the group. So just give me 1 or 2 minutes, and so we're going to share this to the group, and then we'll come back and begin the rest of the show. But I'm super excited. We have a fabulous show planned. I can't wait to introduce you to everyone and hear what they have to share with us. But in the meantime, I'm going to start with some videos, which I normally do at the start of the show in order to give people a chance to hop on and to share some other information. So here we go. So Fair Fight Action, on their website now, they are releasing voters' stories to encourage people to lobby their senators to pass voting rights. So they're putting real faces on voter suppression and what's happening across the country, not just in Georgia and Texas, but a lot of other states across the country. So we're going to listen to some of those stories.
Anti-voter lawmakers in states across the country are pushing voting access out of reach for eligible Americans, and particularly for voters of color. That's why Fair Fight flew dozens of voters from 16 states to Washington, D.C. to meet with their senators and to share their personal experiences with voter suppression. By continuing to share their stories, these voters are making the case for why we so urgently need federal legislation to protect our freedom to vote.
I was so excited to get up to be able to go and cast my vote, but instead the process took all day. We stood in line and it began to rain. By noon, we were hungry. We were unprepared. We did not have any water. We didn't have food. I was hurting. I was in pain.
If voting happens on a day where I'm called to work, I can't vote.
When I received a letter from my voters registration office stating that they had received the information that I am a deceased person.
Are there other people out there who this has also happened to?
I volunteered to be a nonpartisan observer for military members overseas. And a man standing right next to me started the chant to stop the count.
I have PTSD, service connected. During election day, there is no place for me to safely and comfortably be able to vote without being triggered.
When the whole day was over, I was just tired and drained.
Our freedom to vote is on the line, and the stakes could not be higher. Hear more stories at myvotingstory.com.
And we can watch more here.
I am an Air Force veteran that used to operate nuclear weapons. I am currently a law school student at the University of Michigan. I came here because I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Previously, that entailed operating nuclear weapons and providing nuclear deterrence. Today, I am here to defend the right to vote. In my mind, they are the same fight. Those are the stakes. Voter suppression is not politics. I know from personal experience how real this threat is. In the 2020 election, I volunteered to be a nonpartisan observer at the TCF Center in Detroit. What I saw in Detroit shocked and appalled me. Multiple observers were kicked out of the room for misconduct. Groups of observers would gang up and harass election workers that were just trying to do their jobs. An observer was harassed simply for wearing a hijab. The situation in the room grew more and more tense by the hour. A crowd began to gather outside the counting room. They began to bang on the doors, threatening to break them down. A couple of police officers did their best to keep order, but the situation was at serious risk of getting out of hand. There was one moment in particular that was very painful for me. Around 2 p.m., most of the remaining ballots to be counted were from military members overseas. Everyone in the room was aware, or should have been aware, of this fact. And yet, it was at this precise moment that a man standing right next to me started the chant to stop the count. I was furious and heartbroken. I still am. How could my fellow Americans seek to suffocate the voices of my brothers and sisters in arms? The men and women who cast those ballots could die tomorrow to keep us safe. But these are the votes that we can't count? Was this really what we had come to? With democracy on a knife's edge, this cannot be okay. This is not who we are, and it can never be. We desperately need rules that protect the integrity of our vote now.
And we're gonna watch James and Dawn's story.
While I was out of town, I received a letter from my voters registration office stating that they had received information that I am a deceased person and that I had 21 days to come in, to make us, so they, to verify if this is true or not. I was unable to go in within the 21-day period because by the time I received this letter, it was already probably more than 15 days already gone past and I was out of town. My wife read me the letter over the phone.
He was out of town, so I'm reading the mail and I open it up and see that this thing says he's deceased and he has this period of time that he's supposed to come in. He's not able to do it because he's out of town. He's been voting all his life. It's just almost seemed like it's a scam. Something's definitely wrong. The information source is incorrect. And are there other people out there who this has also happened to?
I ended up, my name being taken off of the voters registration list, so now I'm not a registered voter. And of course, I am not deceased. That's how it all started. I am a retired postal worker. I was very concerned about the mailing of this particular letter. Simple reason because it was sent first class. It was not certified. A lot of time mail is misdelivered or lost. If a person doesn't receive this mail, it was uncertified. And I would have went out to the polls to vote. At that time, I would have found out I was not registered to vote. And Louisiana doesn't have a law where you register and vote same day. And I've been voting ever since I was 18 years old, my first year of college. That's when I started voting. I'm 63 years old. I have always voted, and I don't see how this could have happened. I have not moved to a new address. I've been at my current address for at least 25 years or longer, voting, same poll, same neighborhood and everything. So what bothered me is where did this information come from that I'm deceased? How did they come up with this?
People go out and do voters registration, all of these things to try to get people's names on the rolls, and then this willy-nilly way in which a name can be removed should not be allowed to be any type of law in any state. That's why federal regulation is needed to be sure that people just can't have their names removed in this type of manner or any manner that's not correct. If you're going to remove somebody's name, really make sure that you have the correct information. Try to make it easy for the thing to be changed if a mistake was made. This is completely the opposite.
And last one.
I'm a locomotive engineer in Utah, and that means I work on call. I have no set schedule. I might be working Tuesdays, I might be off Tuesdays, and any given Tuesday, there's no way of knowing. When I go to work, I'm usually gone 36 to 48 hours from my house. If voting happens on a day where I'm called to work, I can't vote. If voting happens on a day where I'm coming home, if I'm not home yet, maybe the train's delayed or there's a derailment, something keeps me out of town, I'm unable to vote. In Utah, we have access to different programs for early voting, for instance, no excuse absentee ballots, as well as just straight election day voting. My wife and I choose to use the no excuse absentee ballot drop box or prepaid postage. Drop it into the mailbox, or you can take it to any county or any ballot collection facility throughout the county, plenty of them. It's in a secured sleeve, sign it, seal it up, you drop it off. It's obvious that no absentee balloting in the state of Utah benefits everybody, and especially to workers who are on call, railroaders, airline pilots. Without access to early voting, without access to no excuse absentee balloting, on-call workers effectively have no vote. We'd have to schedule time off, maybe take a vacation day in a work environment that is almost impossible to get pre-approved time off. So it's very essential to keep those programs going. It's important to me. I'm a great believer in the country, in the process, the democratic process. I'm a Navy veteran, so it's definitely in my background to support voting. I'm a union representative for the locomotive engineers in my state. I believe that all the brothers and sisters who are locomotive engineers and all railroaders in the state deserve to have their voice heard. And without those programs, it's almost guaranteed they won't have their voice heard.
All right. So welcome to Grassroots Voices. My name is Robin. This is Grassroots Voices with Robin and Friends, where community and politics meet. This show was started because I'd met so many wonderful people who are change agents, organizers, aspiring candidates who are running for office, and people who are really engaged in what's happening in our communities and looking to change laws and policies. And this show was created so I could elevate their work, already existing work out there, and to introduce you to new people and build coalitions. So this is how the Facebook Live Grassroots Voices came into being. We are streaming the show. We always stream it from Stacey Abrams Grassroots Facebook group. This was a group I started along with some others back in 2019, in the 2019, early 2020. And we've grown to 25,000 members, and we always stream the show from this group. So make sure that you join Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots. We also have sister groups, Team Georgia Blue, another group that was started. I started right around the same time as Team Stacey Abrams Grassroots. And then we have other sister groups, Stacey Abrams Fair Fight Club, Stacey Abrams for President, which was started way before President Biden announced for president, A Blue Georgia for a Stronger and Progressive America, Envoys for Humanity, Disability and Democracy, one of our newest groups, and the Rural Progressive and Afro Southeast Georgian Facebook group. So please join all of the groups. Sometimes we post similar information, but a lot of times you'll get new information in each group. So please join us and support these Facebook groups out here who have been doing wonderful work since 2019 in order to flip Georgia Blue and to win both Senate seats during the runoff, as well as other initiatives and policies. So I don't want to wait too much longer because I'm really excited to jump into this episode. We have a lot to cover and we have fabulous guests. So in this episode, we are going to meet some of the executive board of the Stonewall Democrats. It's one of the oldest LGBTQ democratic organization in the country. And they recently elected new people to the executive board. And one of the main focuses for the new president was to increase diversity and inclusivity in the group. So we're going to talk to Alex Mohajer. We're also going to speak with Jasmine Cannon. She is also on the executive board of the Stonewall Dems, and she did a lot of monumental work involving the Ed Buck case. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, she's going to talk a little bit more about the case and her role and activism in making sure that Ed Buck was convicted and brought to justice. And then we'll also speak with Colby Gardner. He's running for Lieutenant Governor here in Georgia. And he's going to join in on the conversation with Alex and with Jasmine. And we're going to talk about the organizing and voting power of the LGBTQAI plus community across the country. So let me go ahead and introduce our guests before we bring them in. So Alex Mohajer is an award-winning independent political writer and commentator, advocate, and organizer. In 2021, he became the first millennial and first Iranian-American elected president of the Stonewall Democratic Club, the nation's oldest LGBTQ plus feminist political advocacy organization. He previously served as the public and media relations chairman, where he was organizing efforts around the 2020 US presidential election, and he earned a Truman Award because of this work. As a journalist, Alex has written for USA Today, HuffPost, and Medium. And in 2018, his criticisms of the Trump administration won the 2018 Excellence in Journalism Award for Excellence in Feature Writing from the National Association of LGBTQ Journalists. He holds a BA from UC Berkeley and a JD from Chapman University School of Law. Jasmine Cannon, from the newsroom to the front lines for over 15 years, Jasmine Cannon has been outspoken on today's most pressing social issues at the national and local levels. Unapologetically Black, Jasmine has developed a strong national following for her willingness to tell it like it is on uncomfortable and hard to discuss issues around race, politics, and society. Jasmine is proud of her reputation for bringing attention to stories and issues that would have gone underreported, overlooked, or just ignored. For her work, she was named Out Magazine's Journalist of the Year, one of Essence Magazine's 25 Women Shaping the World, and one of LA's most fascinating Angelinos by the LA Weekly. An advocate for underrepresented and marginalized groups, Jasmine is also a seasoned political and communication strategist who has worked at all levels of government, including the California State Assembly and the House of Representatives. In Los Angeles, she works for several city and county governments, including 5 mayors and the president of LA's City Council. In addition to being elected member of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, Jasmine is a proud co-founder of the National Black Justice Coalition, the nation's largest and oldest Black, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender civil rights organization. She is a former co-chair of the National Stonewall Dems Black Caucus. She currently sits on the board of the LA African American Women's Political Action Committee, Black Alliance for Justice Immigration Political Action Committee, and the Stonewall Democrats. And lastly, Colby Gardner is an entrepreneur, community activist, organizer, and democratic strategist. He has also filed to run for Lieutenant Governor of Georgia. During his professional career, he has advised organizations and campaigns all over the country, from Black Voters Matter, political director for Sarah Riggs Amico's campaign for Lieutenant Governor in 2018, and the Youth Project for Secretary Hillary Clinton and Senator Tim Kaine's 2016 campaign. He's engaged with countless nonprofits and elected officials, advancing the democratic agenda, fighting for healthcare, jobs, and justice all over the country. Before forming his company, United Strategies Group, Colby worked in corporate operations at Apple and Verizon Wireless. Colby is an alum of Clark Atlanta University, where he studied business administration with a concentration in marketing. And he is also active in the Human Rights Campaign and Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, Inc. He's also on the National Board of Directors, advising the organization since it celebrated its 100th anniversary. So I'm really excited to open up this conversation. Please drop all your comments and questions or in the comments section, and I'll do my best to get to them. But either way, leave your comments, and if they're not addressed this episode, we'll definitely address them the next episode. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Alex, Jasmine, and Colby Gardner. We'll give everyone a chance to hop on. Wonderful. Hi.
Robin.
Hello. Hi.
How are y'all?
Oh, great.
How are you?
I'm so glad everyone made it in. How are you all tonight or today in California?
It's hot. It's rainy here.
Okay. I'm actually in the south suburbs of Chicago, so the temperature's dropped here, but it's nice. So it's nice to have some cool weather for a little bit. So you all, I just reading your bios, and I'm learning so much new information about all of you, and you all are so active and engaged. And that's the point of this show, is to elevate already existing organizations and initiatives and work out there, as well as to highlight people like you and the work you all are doing. So thank you for coming on here and for being patient and figuring out the time zone stuff and everything, but it's a real honor to have all of you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're here. So I figured maybe I would start with Alex, because I kind of met Alex in the digital space around the runoffs, and he also was a participant in one of our programs that we did at Paths to Peace. And so I was so excited when you told me that you were running for president of the Stonewall Dems, and I was following along, and you all just did a really tremendous job with the election and everything. So I wanted to just kind of start with you, Alex, and if you could just maybe share with people why you decided to run for president, and what made you think different, or what your agenda is, how is it different from maybe what's been done in the past?
Well, I think what is clear to me, at least observing what's going on in politics, is we've been collectively through so much just in the last few years, just a collective trauma after collective trauma. And I view Trump's election as being a collective trauma, but to be certainly clear, it predates Trump. We've had issues in our democratic processes and in politics for a very, very long time, decades and even longer. And so I think though the last few years really brought these issues to the fore, where it's like you can't turn away anymore. And for me, it was around the summer of 2020, when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, that I realized that I myself have participated in systems, by participating in the systems at all, that have marginalized and oppressed people. So, but I've always considered myself an activist and a freedom fighter, and so that was a hard thing to reconcile. And I decided that what we're being asked to do as a country, and in microcosmically in organizing spaces, is to change, and that we have to be that change, and that we have to start actually doing the work of breaking these systems open. And so I was never of the mind that I was trying to be destructive, because I also don't think that we should tear down things like the Democratic Party, which is, I think, the vessel for making these changes happen. That's my opinion. But that we need to be disruptive and to sort of challenge the status quo. So that was what I intended to do at Stonewall. And I think it's been an incredibly eye-opening educational experience, and I'm really excited about the work that we get to do with people that I respect and admire, like Jasmine. I don't know if she's in the box underneath me, but like Jasmine, who I think are really the ones who've been at the forefront of this for a very long time. So I've worked in politics a long time on campaigns, in digital spaces, And so I felt like I could bring a level of knowledge about the way that the system works, as well as some legitimate push for reforming these systems. And if you look at what Fair Fight is doing, that is the answer. You want to know how to win? It's by going into community spaces and doing the work on the ground in the community to enfranchise more people into the process. So I don't think that it's going to be easy work, because I don't think Democrats are monolithic. I don't think LGBTQ people are monolithic, that is for sure. But we need to be doing this work at the community level. And that's how we make the broader change happen across the country. So that's kind of my jazz. That's my jam. And I adore you, Robin. Thanks for having me. And your Paths to Healing program was really, really life-changing. So I really appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. And thank you for participating in Paths to Peace. So I did want to just ask the same question to Jasmine, like, why did you decide to run? Was this something that you were planning to do, or did you feel, moved? And I know you've done a ton of activism work. How did that play in to lead up to this moment for you to run for executive board for Stonewall Dems?
So I was involved with Stonewall years and years ago on the national level. So I was at that time too, I was chair of the Black Caucus for the National Stonewall Democrats. So I had been involved on that level. Locally, I wasn't trying to get involved with the local Stonewall Democratic Club at all. As a matter of fact, I'm like super busy, and I'm like, oh my God, I took on one more thing, but I decided to do it because similar to what Alex said, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And, we could sit around and complain about organizations and groups, or we can get involved in these groups and try to change them from the inside. And so that's why I ran for County Central Committee. That's why I ran for the executive board of Stonewall. And my inspiration for that, I had a lot to do with Ed Buck and a lot of what I was seeing and hearing coming out of that Democratic club around him. And I just think it's so wonderful that he's gone and I'm in. And I'm looking forward to the future of the group under Alex's leadership. I mean, just in the short time that Alex has taken the lead, the group is like a whole different club. It's wonderful. But that's really my emphasis. I can't sit up here and say I had some burning desire to be on the executive board. I didn't, because I'm already on several other boards. But like I said, I don't ever want to be that person that just sits around and complains about stuff and then doesn't try to get involved to help be a part of the change. And so I'm even more excited now that I did it because of the people who won and who I get to work with.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm so happy that you all took that plunge. And we're going to definitely, touch on the Ed Buck case later on. And I'm going to open up to you as well, Colby. I know you're here in Georgia, and I wanted you to come on too, because you're someone who is now putting yourself out there running for lieutenant governor. So can you tell me maybe again why you decided to do this? Was there something that took you to the edge to get you to take that leap? And why would you, or what brought you here, I guess, leading up to it, since you have done a lot of political work out there?
Absolutely. Again, Robin, thanks so much for having me join, and to Jasmine, Alex, hearing your stories is definitely inspiration for me as well. But when I think about my story, what got me here, in 2008, I was a freshman at Clark Lane University, and I was blessed to graduate high school when I was 16. And that was also around the time that President Barack Obama was running for office. And that was a lot of energy here in the city. And that's really when I got involved in organizing, because at my heart, I'm an organizer. That's the work that I enjoy, really getting out there and talking to community members about how we can improve their communities. And I think that's the heart of civic engagement. But even before that, I was raised by my grandmother, born in 1943 in the Deep South. Her parents were sharecroppers. She graduated high school. She purchased a house. She took care of her children. And then when the time came, she took care of me and my brothers as well. And at the end of 40 years of work, she made 40 years of work, $7.75 per hour. And we just know that in today's economy, making close to minimum wage, you can take care of your family, much less future generations. And as I look at Georgia, as I look at the entire country, really, we understand that opportunities are not being presented to everyone on equal footing. That can be based on your zip code, your educational attainment, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, and oftentimes intersectionality of all those things. And as we look at our systems and we're being critical, it's not because we're being like overly critical, it's because we care. And in our heart, we want people to be okay. And as I look here in Georgia, when we have statistics that are scary in a lot of ways, when it comes to maternal mortality, the closure of rural hospitals, the fact that our schools have been underfunded to the tune of about $20 billion over 20 years, you're seeing people hurt. And my entire campaign is razor focused on heading to the Gold Dome to fight for working class and poor people. So that way we can eradicate some of those barriers to make sure that future generations will have the ability to succeed in ways that they are currently being excluded. I love this work, being in the fight every day, just to make sure we can do that work with the great partners like all of y'all.
Thank you for sharing your story. And I'm so happy to see, younger and younger people running for office, especially in Georgia and in the South. Really around the country. But I think that's so important that you are honoring your grandmother and, doing the work that you're doing out there. So this is a question for everybody. How do you feel as far as the voting power of the LGBTQAI plus community? I mean, I know it's not like one group, but it is a powerful voting bloc that we've seen over the last 20 or some years. And of course, there's intersectionality and overlaps and things that are going on there. But, you could definitely point to certain policies and legislation and candidates that are now in office because of this powerful voting bloc. And so, did you always feel included in that voting bloc, or how would you maybe describe it now, and where would you like to see it go?
So no, I don't even look at myself as a LGBTQIA voter. I'm a Black voter, and I tend to vote in the best interest of poor and Black people, which are not always the same group. There are poor white people, poor Latinx people, right? And as far as the voting bloc is concerned, look, no, it's not perfect under that rainbow. Remember, under that voting bloc, you have Republicans, you have log-cabin Republicans, you got Stonewall Democrats, you have, I'll give you an example. For a long time, the only issue that was getting funded and that people cared about was gay marriage. It was like marriage, right? And that's what the LGBTQIA community was pushing for. And I would always say, well, look, as a Black lesbian, I can get married tomorrow, but if I don't have the money to buy a house, if I can't get a job, if I don't have access to health care, if I don't, what is the generational wealth me and my partner are accumulating here or trying to pass down? Like, that was, that for the most part, that's the ceiling for white gay men and white gay women. That was their ceiling, was gay marriage. And as a person of color, as a Black woman, that is not my ceiling, right? And so being able to get married wasn't like the end all for me. And I still see a lot of that today in our voting bloc, right? So I see a lot of issues that are important to one group of people. And then there are these other issues, right? And the other issues are the everyday issues. Food, housing, as far as I'm concerned, and Alex, you could jump in here, in LA, our community should be focused on LGBTQIA youth who are homeless. that should be our number one issue in Los Angeles, because, you know, I live downtown at the intersection of murder and rape, and all I see are young, queer, unhoused people. And it's like, where are we? Like, are we still worried about trying to get married and all this stuff? Like, what future are we leaving or developing for these young people that are behind us? I mean, could you imagine at 16, at 17, at 18, already being on Skid Row? Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think that this is actually what this is really a conversation about, is intersectionality, because the LGBTQ community, like I said earlier, is not a monolith by virtue of the fact that we are a diverse group. Like, we do come from different backgrounds. There is intersectionality involved. So Jasmine's experience as a queer woman of color is not the same as mine as a cisgendered gay man. But, you know, I do also want to say, though, that the LGBTQ community represents, I think, 10 million registered voters across the US identify as LGBTQ. But even that statistic is not fully formed, because we know that not a lot of people feel safe or comfortable to be fully forthcoming about their gender identity or their sexual orientation. So it's a demographic that it's hard to fully identify all the time. But what we do know is that we have amongst us common interests, like what Jasmine said. If you are not invested in the housing crisis here in Los Angeles, you're not paying attention, you know, and that directly affects our community. And then there's the issue of a lot of LGBTQ people, particularly gay men, which have taken up the lion's share of attention for the community. I think they think that the LGBTQ movement ended with marriage equality in 2015. But, you know, just this year, there have been over 100 pieces of anti-trans legislation that have been passed or introduced in GOP-controlled state legislatures across the United States. Now, if you enjoy marriage equality in the United States, that's because trans activists were doing the work on the ground for 50 years at the forefront of the movement, particularly trans women of color. And now you got your marriage equality, so it's time for you to extend that privilege back, because our community is very much so under attack. So there are ways that we can come together around our shared interests, and I think it would be very powerful if we come as a block. You got to come through the LGBTQ community, but that means that the parties and the movements that seek our vote have to represent the broad spectrum of LGBTQ voices. And we have to do the work to organize with one another and come together around our shared goals. It's not easy work, but I do believe it's possible. And I'll also say, I think there's 20% of, what's the statistics? I just read this on the Williams Institute. 21% of LGBTQ adults are not registered to vote. If we decide elections here in the US by 3 million votes, 4 million votes in the presidential races, and much less down ticket, you know, there is power there. There's definitive decision-making power there. And we need to be doing the work to enfranchise more members of our community. A lot of people need to be this process. That's why I'm excited about you, Colby. I think it's fantastic that you're running. I'm 36 years old, and people acted like it was very bizarre that I would run for my little race in this little corner of the world. Like I'm too young, like I am seeking to take what belongs to the generation that came before me. And that's, you know, that's rubbish, you know, because it's time to pass the reins to a younger, more progressive perspective, because you guys have your chance and the world's on fire. So let's pass the baton. So that's my thoughts on LGBTQ participation in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. To echo those sentiments, I think at its root, the LGBT rights movement is a civil rights conversation, and it's always been that. Like Alex said, first Pride was a riot And as we think about that tradition, we have to continue pressing forward to make sure that no group, no person is being oppressed, and recognizing that there's intersectionality in all those spaces between the rights of reproductive freedoms are currently being under attack in Texas. That is in itself a queer issue of the health disparities that we're facing all over the country. Being here in Atlanta, we're so close to the HIV and AIDS epidemic being here, and the mismanagement of resources that has happened all over the country, but very specifically around housing, need to be addressed. Because again, we're seeing our LGBT brothers and sisters homeless. I think housing is one of those rights that we have to fight for to make sure that they're able to build the life that they want to build. But again, we have a lot of work to do. And again, I'm happy to be in that fight at just 30 years old, tapping in with partners in every level of government to make sure we can get that done.
And I wanted to, it's interesting because I have a friend, Kimberly, she started the Disability and Democracy Facebook group just maybe a month or so ago. We're going to do a whole show with her, but we were talking and she was saying, you know, there's not really, I mean, you know, we label it as disability rights, she said, but you know, really disability rights are connected to all of these other things that we're fighting for. And similar to what you're saying, housing, healthcare, voting rights, you know, all of these. She's like, you know, there's maybe some specifics that specifically impacts people who might be part of, you know, that group. But she's like, really, it comes under, you know, all of these, all this other legislation that impacts everybody. So, so that's what this kind of, you know, reminds me of. And I did want to go into, because we're talking about housing and a lot of young people and a lot of young people of color being homeless in various places. And Jasmine, could you, you know, for those people who maybe don't understand why, or, you know, are just kind of tuned out on that, can you maybe talk about why this is happening, and then also kind of go into the Ed Buck case and how, you know, a lot of these young people of color were impacted by him and you know, the crimes that he committed?
Okay, well, it's happening because the cost of living is too damn high, and the cost of housing is too high, and the salaries are too low, and our public officials aren't doing enough to deal with that issue, right? So in Los Angeles, you know, you go to Skid Row and all you see are, for the most part, Black men. They make up the majority of Skid Row. You know, in LA, our crisis around being in a house is unmatched, as well as our housing crisis, right? So we have a problem with just having enough affordable housing too. That is another humongous issue. Like, we got some housing here. You want to pay $5,000 a month or $4,000 a month, you can have a really, you know, great 800 square feet place. Because I mean, it's really that bad down here. And it's only going to get worse as these moratoriums are lifted. You know, these stopgaps, these things that were put into place to help folks with the pandemic, as they are taken away, you're going to see more and more people, more and more families, you know, living in the parking lot and living on the streets. And I'm not ready for that. Like, you know, it's bad enough here in LA, and I just, you know, I don't know what we're going to do. And I don't know what the answer is, but I know it's not what's happening right now. How this crisis fed into the Ed Buck situation was that it gave him fertile playing ground. Ed Buck knew to go after Black men who were homeless, who needed a place to take a shower and wanted some place to sleep that wasn't in a tent or on a sidewalk, right? And there's no shortage, sadly, of Black men in that situation here in Los Angeles. And so when I talk about the Ed Buck case, I always remind people, like, the intersectionality of all these different issues. And yes, the housing crisis, the homelessness crisis here had a huge impact on that case, because that's how he found his victim, right? Because like I said, people get tired of sleeping on the street. They're scared. People are hungry. And people always like to make little snide comments about, well, I wouldn't, and you don't know what you would do until you are in that situation. You have absolutely no idea what you would do if you hadn't eaten for 4 days, if you found yourself, on Main and First Street. You have no idea. So, I tell people not to judge these men because you weren't in their situation, and Ed Buck's not the only Ed Buck, and our crisis is still going on. I mean, there's still plenty of men and women who are living on the streets here in Los Angeles, and so it is absolutely mind-boggling to me that there's so much wealth in this country, particularly in this state and in this city, and yet we have so many people living in absolute poverty, just absolute. It is horrific.
Oh, and then and just like you were saying, the wealth, I lived in Oakland for about 2 years, about 10 years or so ago, but the wealth in California is astronomical, when you see like who's living there and how they're living and what's happening. But then you put it right next to other parts of the county and you're stunned, that it just doesn't, add up, it's literally la la land, when you think about it. And it is so true, when you think about people who are like the most vulnerable, and then they don't have protections. And, again, you don't, like you said, you don't know what you would do in that situation. But for people who don't know, and I don't want to spend like too much time about the Ed Buck case, but I do think it's an important case, and how you all, how especially Jasmine, the work that you did around it. But so he was a powerful gay white man.
I don't know how powerful he was.
Oh, he wasn't powerful. Sorry.
But he was a white gay man in West Hollywood who had a lot of money, still does have a lot of money. We are trying to get that money. He still has it. And he used that money to take advantage of vulnerable Black men. Now, he had a thing for Black men. He did. And his thing was shooting them up with crystal meth and other drugs and having them do certain things. And in 2 situations, 2 men died, Jamel Moore and Timothy Dean. And then another situation, a young man almost died. But he had been doing this for over 20 years. There was no shortage of victims, and it took almost 3 years to get him arrested and charged after 2 people died. And then in July, he was finally convicted on all 9 counts that he faced. And now we're just waiting for his sentencing date. But it took 4 years to get him off the street. And he was a big part of the Democratic Party here and a big time donor, gave a lot of money to a lot of people. And I still do believe that's why people just, like to bury their head in the sand when it comes to Ed Buck. They don't want to talk about it. They still don't want to talk about it, but they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about it. Come and make sure.
Can I just say, Robin, because I feel like I need to gas her up just a little bit.
No, you don't.
But Jasmine Cannon is like basically like a folk hero now. I mean, her reporting and investigating on this issue when the district attorney at the time wouldn't charge him, when we weren't getting any traction on this, her work around it, her reporting and her investigation around it really brought Ed Buck to justice. You deserve a lot of credit. I know that you're like a hero to me because of your tenacity and your hard work, and you were relentless and you wouldn't stop. And I was there for the closing arguments of that trial with you. And I just remember being very proud, really proud to even know you, because that right there, that's special, that's magic. So I really appreciate you. And Ed Buck was on the leadership of our organization, my organization, for years and years. One of the first things that we did after the election for our executive boards was to have a fundraiser for Ed Buck's victims. And that's like, take a note, everybody. If you gave money to Ed Buck, you know, it's not easy, but it's okay to be like, hey, we did the wrong thing and it's time to try to pay it back. You know, we can do that. We can lead with the courage of our convictions, with moral clarity, you know. So I think it was important for us to do that at Stonewall. But I also want to say that this is an issue. The Ed Buck case has a lot of issues surrounding it, but I want to bring up the issue of drug and alcohol addiction, which LGBTQ people face 2-to-1 to their heterosexual counterparts, 2-to-1. And we live in a society that demonizes mental health issues, stigmatizes mental health and drug and alcohol addiction. It's something that affects at least one person that you know in this room, or that you're someone who's watching, you know, at least one person who struggles with this. And we have an entire system that criminalizes homelessness, that criminalizes drug and alcohol addiction, but there are disparities in the way that it's enforced. So, you know, what kind of a world would we live in had Ed Buck, you know, received treatment 20 years ago? Like real treatment, had he had some sort of institutional resources that would have prevented him from going down this path. And ultimately, I don't know if I believe that, I don't know Ed Buck, so I don't know if it would have happened ultimately, but I think we need to look at our systems and how we treat mental health, because we have a burgeoning mental health crisis in the United States. So earlier we were talking about this. Guess what? Climate justice is an LGBTQ issue. Drug and alcohol addiction, that's an LGBTQ issue. Mental health, LGBTQ issue. Criminal justice, that's an LGBTQ issue. You know, student loans, that's an LGBTQ issue. And so, yeah, but I wanted to gas you up, Jasmine, because you were being a little modest for me. And
so funny.
Thank you, Alex. Oh, sorry, Colby, go ahead.
If I could take a minute to do the same, when I saw that I would be on the panel with you, I'm fanning out just a little bit because I am a huge hero. I'm a huge fan of your work. You are a hero for the work that you did there. I was literally listening to a podcast about you before I got the email from Robin. I was like, oh my gosh. Again, thank you for your hard work. And again, thank you.
Thank you. What's your next question, Robin?
I'm like, now you have to receive your flowers. Yes, I'm so glad that you stuck with it. And I think it's so important to have more. I have a bachelor's in journalism, and it comes up in different ways, you know, throughout my career and my life. But, you know, when I look at journalists, filmmakers, you know, artists, I think it's so important to have people like that running for offices and representing people. When I think about Senator Ossoff, he was a documentary filmmaker. And I know when I first heard that about him when he ran for Congress, that really, I was like, okay, this is, you know, this is something different. You know, the way he thinks and approaches things are different. The way he sees the world is different. And then Dante Carter, who is running for mayor of Sandy Springs here in Georgia. He's also he has a journalism background, and he started a media company where they organized, he highlighted and worked with organizers and worked around different cases to feature information about cases that had to do with social justice. And, you know, he had various clients in that space, and he would elevate their voices through his work. So I think it's so important to have people like you, journalists like you, who are willing to take that leadership, because you all are, you know, reporting things, you're reporting the truth, and you care about facts, you know, you're holding people accountable. And we need more of that in the political space as well as the organizing space as well.
Hey, you guys remember facts? Those were the days.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, what's that again? But yeah, Alex, tell us a little bit about your show your new show online.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have a new show. I don't have a new show online. I have a journalism background too. And last year I was doing a show for a new startup digital platform called Haps that ended up getting like 1 million views. And I did it for a year. But I recently gave it up because of my new Stonewall responsibilities, because it's busy. I'm busy. So I couldn't do it anymore. I had been working in media spaces for a long time, and I was writing for Huffington Post and USA Today. And like right after the 2016 election, because I think Colby, I heard that you're a Hillary Clinton alum. And so I was really pissed off about that election. I started writing for HuffPost. And very, very quickly, I was getting like out of nowhere, like booked on the cable shows. And it was just taking off really fast because apparently it's really unique to be pissed off and speaking out in favor of Hillary Clinton. And that kind of grew. And like, well, if you speak out for the women, that's the reality. And so that kind of took off, and I realized that you can use these spaces, the intersection of media and politics and journalism and digital media particularly, to help advance issues, causes, candidates, if you're doing it right and working with all the right people. So I was working in politics from that standpoint for a long time. And then Haps reached out to me, and it was cool. I was doing a daily show for them for a year every morning for 15 minutes, just like running down everything that was going on. And basically we lived through the most insane year during that time. So it was like the BLM protests, the Chauvin murder, George Floyd, the 2020 election, which the insurrection, COVID, Trump, it was a really nutty year. So it kind of was a nice way of processing what was going on too, and being in control of the facts, because we are such a facts averse time. And I guess we built some community around it too. And so that was nice. And you and I worked together too around the 2020 election. So that was all good jazz. But yes, not doing it right now, taking a back seat.
That is totally understandable. It was your news show, and I was watching it, like that, because there was a time where I literally would, I would see you go live, and because it was so good, like you would give, various stories, current stories that were happening that day. And it just became part of my little ritual where if I was gonna watch news, then I was gonna watch your show. So thanks for doing it. I know you have a lot on your plate, but I really enjoyed it, and you definitely have a lot of talent. So thank you for sharing that. And then I wanted to throw out one more question, because I don't want to keep you all forever, because I know you have things to do. But where would you like to see, as far as mobilizing voters, especially new people who are coming into Stonewall Dems, or young people, or people that you are reaching out to, whether it's for your candidacy, Colby, or for the Stonewall Dems, or any other kind of organizing work?
A big question. I'll just do Stonewall. Like, my goals for Stonewall, look, Stonewall Democratic Club is not the West Hollywood LGBTQAI Democratic Club. It is the LA County Queer Dem Club. So I want to see more people of color from all parts of our county engaged who are registered Democrats engaged in our club, not just people who live in West Hollywood and Silver Lake and, whatever. I want to see people from Inglewood and East LA and, Hawthorne and other parts that traditionally haven't been necessarily engaged with Stonewall, but by virtue of who that person is, they would belong, they should be a member. And so I'm hopeful to see that. And I'm just hopeful that just in general here in LA, that, look, I am a political strategist. So I work on campaigns. That's what I do actually to get paid. And, we did a big campaign around educating people on what a district attorney does, because a lot of people didn't know what a DA did until, we had all the BLM stuff and folks were like, aha. So now it's like, got to educate you on what a city attorney does, because that's the partner, that's the complement to the DA in our city. And if you care about homelessness, the DA ain't got nothing to do with that. That is all our city attorney. And we have a big mayor's race, a big city attorney's race coming up. And I want informed voters. I don't like sheeple. I don't want people just going to vote because so-and-so said, go vote for this person. I mean, I want people to actually know what they're voting for and who they're voting for. And so I'll be doing a lot of work around that.
Awesome. Well, for me, here in Georgia, we have our municipal elections coming up in less than 50 days. And then, of course, midterms next year as well. My goal is to, and I'm extremely hopeful because I'm seeing it already happen, to see more young people get engaged in the political process, whether that's running themselves, working on campaigns, or even volunteering to work for our elections board to make sure that we're having our fair elections all around our state. I'm seeing some young people run for school board, which I think is a critically important role to make sure that folks run and win for. And I'm encouraged. I think in the wake of in the post-George Floyd world, you're seeing an amazing amount of young people get engaged in the process. And I want to see that continue. Of course, next May, I plan to win my primary myself. And I think that'll help people as we go into the November elections. But beyond that, along the way, empowering each and every person that I come in contact with every tool that they can use to advance our democracy. And I think that's the work that will carry us through, not only through the midterms, but also as we look at 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, so I think what's important to me with this subject is this idea that about representation. It's not just diversity in your membership, your organization, your spaces. It's about you going to spaces that you're not traditionally used to or might not feel fully comfortable with, and enfranchising people. It's about us doing the work, not just imagining some sort of like diversity coming out of nowhere. Diversity is also about representation in terms of where we show up. So like Stonewall just went to Long Beach Trans Pride on Saturday, and I was really proud of us for being there. If we are not enfranchising trans people into our organization, we are not honoring the namesake Stonewall. And if we're not bringing in people of color into our organization, we're not honoring our namesake, Stonewall. And Colby said it earlier. It was a riot in response to an oppressive surveillance police state. And we see this playing out right now in real time. There's the name Stonewall, can't say the words Black Lives Matter and own it and feel comfortable with it. We've gotten too far away from our history. We're not honoring our namesake. So that's really important to me, A, because I'm sentimental, and B, because I have a great deal of reverence from the movements. And so for me, that's what this is about for me over the next, I have a 2-year term. I don't think I'm planning on doing it for more than one term. I think it's about, for me, going to spaces that we're not used to and bringing more people into the process. And I don't think that'll be easy. I don't think like we're gonna show up to like the Antelope Valley and there's gonna be like 100 people there ready to go. I think it's gonna be slow grinding work, but we have to start putting our presence out there and laying groundwork for a long game. And I think that there are lots of people out there who are really, really willing and able and want to get involved and just don't have a home to do it. So let's be that home. Let's be the rabble rousers that we were intended to be.
I love that. Well, I think you all are doing fantastic work, and again, young people getting involved, educating people on civics and explaining why. I mean, that's so empowering for people, and going into those spaces, meeting people where they are, and empowering them and expanding the experience. I think that's definitely where we're going. And I know you had mentioned, Alex, that Stonewall will be partnering with the Women's March for the March for Reproductive Rights on October 2nd. And then you all just organized to help make sure that Governor Gavin Newsom wasn't recalled, and that he's going to retain his seat. So, so that's fantastic. And if you want to learn more about the Stonewall Dems, you can go to stonewalldems.org or follow them on social media, Stonewall Dems LA. And then Colby, did you want to share where people can find you if they want to make a grassroots donation or volunteer or just find out more about your campaign for Lieutenant Governor of Georgia?
Absolutely. If everyone could visit colbyforgeorgia.com. It's Colby Gardner on all social media platforms as well. There you'll find out about our campaign events we have coming up throughout this fall. And then, of course, I would love if anyone can make a $5 or $10 donation to keep us going. We're in the lead right now as far as the Democrats for fundraising, and we want to keep that momentum going as we look forward to the midterms next year. And also, if you live here in Georgia, I would love to get your vote as well. And please feel free to reach out. I love to talk to everyone.
I love that you ask, people, for their support and their vote. I think that's so important. And then we're going to drop your website in the comments. As say it one more time, Colby.
Colby for Georgia.
Colbyforgeorgia.com.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. And so we'll drop that link in the comments as well as stonewalldems.org. And anything else you want to highlight or plug, Jasmine, or do you have any projects or anything that you want us to know about?
I'm always doing stuff. My website's iamjasmine.com and all my socials are there. I am JASMYNE.com.
Thank you. So we'll drop that website as well in the chat. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll come back and be a guest again either later this year or next year, and just sharing what you're up to at that point, because I know you all are doing so much out there. So thank you again for coming. It's been an honor and pleasure to hear from you all, and I hope that we can cross paths again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
Bye, Colby. Bye, Alex.
Bye, Colby.
Bye, Colby.
Good luck on your race. Proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, good luck on your race.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye, Robin.
Bye-bye. Thank you. So that was fantastic. So what we're going to do, we're just going to shift gears real quick. I just had a few announcements to make. A lot has been going on this past week when it comes to voting rights. So we are still calling our senators, asking that they pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. This phone number is 833-465-7142. So again, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act has already passed the House and it's in the Senate. This is a separate bill from the new bill that I'm going to talk about in a second. So Fair Fight Action, we're continuing to support Fair Fight, and we're all calling our senators at this number. It's super easy. It takes less than 2 or 3 minutes. You just call, you put your zip code in, and then they'll connect you to your senator's office. And so just in case there's been so much happening again with these bills, and things are changing every day. So if you're wondering, what do you need to say when you call, Fair Fight offered some guidance on that. So I wanted to share that with people. So you can say to your senator that, this is a decisive moment for our nation, and the time has never been more urgent for them to take action on voting rights. And so you can ask them to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. And we need this to happen before the redistricting maps are formally approved. So as we speak, these they're starting to draw these districting maps that will determine, how many House seats will be available in 2022, and the gerrymandering could happen, partisan gerrymandering could happen, but these bills are going to defeat some of the partisan gerrymandering as well as other things. So we really need the senators to step up and fight to protect our fundamental rights, and we need to ask that they pass these critical bills. Okay, so Fair Fight, because we're now in fall, happy fall equinox. Fair Fight Action is launching Freedom to Vote Fall. So we're done with hot call summer. which actually was really great. Hot Call Summer started in June, and 75,000 calls were made to senators over the summer. So trust me, if you made a call, it absolutely mattered, because it really pushed the members of Congress to take this seriously and to keep going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out new bills. So thank you for calling and participating in Hot Call Summer. So now we're doing Freedom to Vote Fall, and same number, 833-465-7142. And we also want to ask that your senator supports the Freedom to Vote Act. So there's two different bills: John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and then the Freedom to Vote Act. And so according to Fair Fight, the Freedom to Vote Act, pretty much this was the act that came out of the discussions around the For the People Act. So For the People Act is no longer, it is now the Freedom to Vote Act. And it takes the necessary steps to protect our democracy and strengthen national standards for voting access for every eligible American, regardless of their zip code. So the provisions of the Freedom to Vote Act include overwhelming support by Americans across the party line. So people from both sides support this, because again, this is not a partisan issue. Voting and access to the ballot is something we want all Americans to have, regardless of what party you support or who you support. And we need people to respond. We need the senators to respond to the demands of their constituents. So the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, according to Fair Fight, will protect our democracy by ensuring that Americans can register to vote, cast a ballot, and have it fairly counted. So if you want more information on both bills, you can go to stopjimcrow2.com. stopjimcrow2.com, and that is again sponsored through Fair Fight Action. So I wanted to cover the Freedom to Vote Act, but there really just isn't enough time. It's probably going to be a whole separate updated show, but there's a great article out there by Mark Elias. He's a voting rights expert. He's great to follow on Twitter. He's always doing updates and hosting rooms, each week talking about voting rights. And he wrote an excellent article out there recently about the Freedom to Vote Act and what's in it, what's missing, and why we need this bill passed. So again, I'll break that article down another time, but I just wanted to let you all know about it. Also, Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight launched a new community innovative text and phone program. So if you text 404 or call 404-732-1022, you don't have to be from Georgia to do this. You'll get signed up so you can send messages and leave messages to Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight through this local number right here. And then sometimes they respond back with, whatever is going on at that moment. But so it's pretty cool to get texts and calls from Stacey Abrams. And then wonderful news, Dante Carter, who I was speaking about earlier, he is running for mayor of Sandy Springs, Georgia. He was endorsed by Fair Fight. And that is huge because they do not just give their endorsement to anyone. So that's really special. That they see what we see in Dante. So congratulations, Dante Carter and team Dante Carter. And his election is coming up November 2nd. So please make sure to stop by his website. Again, if you can donate, just like Colby said, if you can support Colby and Dante, $5, $10, a glass or, a cup of coffee at Starbucks, donate this money. Grassroots money absolutely matters and helps and all adds up. So this is huge that Fair Fight is lending their support to Dante Carter. I didn't even know Dante didn't, tell me anything about it. I just saw it on social media and I was so excited, so happy to see this. So this is huge. And then I just wanted to pub the March for Reproductive Justice. There's going to be events happening in Georgia as well as across the country. But I'll show both websites. So if you're not in Georgia, you'll know where to sign up. But the March for Reproductive Justice here in Georgia is going to be Saturday, October 2nd at Liberty Plaza, which is across from the Georgia State Capitol, 11 a.m. Please come out and support. It's going to be a really important moment because the Supreme Court will be going back in session either that day or I think maybe the day after. So there's going to be marches in around Georgia. I believe there's one in Savannah. another in another part of Fulton County. It's either Marietta or Marietta, I want to say, but it's on the website for the National Women's March as well. So if you're not in Georgia, go to womensmarch.com and then find a city that's closest to you. They're constantly adding cities and events every day. So you go in, you put your zip code in, and then it'll tell you whatever the closest event is in your area. And my next interview is going to be next week. On Tuesday, I will be interviewing Rebecca Hart. She's the CEO of Fair Count, a nonprofit organization founded by Stacey Abrams in Georgia that works to build long-term power in communities that have been undercounted in the census, underrepresented at the polls, and torn apart by redistricting. And Rebecca has more than 20 years of experience in political campaign, policy, and advocacy work. And she's done this work in Georgia and around the country. So very excited to talk about what the work Fair Count's been doing. You know, they were out there really informing people about the census in 2020. They're already looking forward to the next census in 2030. They've been doing a lot of work around making sure people had COVID testing and that people are getting vaccinated. And so they're doing a lot of tremendous work on the ground in the community. So it's really great that we're going to have Rebecca, the CEO of Fair Count, join us and, you know, tell us how we can get more involved with the work that she's doing. And then I'm still promoting for my first episode, Abigail Cook and Patrick Rodriguez. They were two system impacted people who are taking steps to end mass incarceration. And so episode 1 of Grassroots Voices, they talked about probation and parole reform. So please consider going to Reform Alliance over here, action.reformalliance.com, as well as commongoodatlanta.com. Common Good Atlanta, they bring resources and educational resources into prisons and teach people and share educational trainings and information with them. So you can make a donation or support their cause. Also, please check out, I think it was episode 4 of Grassroots Voices with Shireen Mitchell. She's a social analyst and diversity consultant, and she talked a lot about the COVID disinformation and misinformation campaigns that are specifically targeting people of color, Black people, as well as different political campaigns that are targeting Black voters. And so it's a really important episode, especially if you're in the digital space, because there's a lot of empowering work that you can do just by the kind of the information you choose to share on your own social media. So it's a really great episode. Look up Shireen. And then lastly, if there's comments, show ideas, guest suggestions, feel free to email me, grassrootsvoices999@gmail.com. And I would love to hear your ideas, or if there's guests you want featured. Some of you have been sending me some ideas, so thank you. Keep them coming. And we are really approaching almost having October booked. So please contact me as soon as you can, so I can, put people on the calendar and figure out how to, bring everybody into these different episodes. And then if you want to support the show with a Grassroots donation, $3, $5, $10, you can Venmo me or PayPal me. Some people like to support, in that way, some of my efforts, or they'll say, if I was in town, I would take you to lunch, or we go grab a coffee or a cocktail or something and talk. And, obviously the pandemic prevented a lot of that and quarantine. So sometimes people will give me grassroots donations. I do this as a labor of love because I want to get this information out there and elevate other people. But I mean, it does take time, work, and energy. So if you do want to support a grassroots donation, I'll just say thank you and I'll receive that. But that's not the only way. It's a huge help, even more, in many cases, is to like and share this episode, tag a friend in the comments that you think might enjoy this information, leave comments, join the groups, and just keep fighting for voting rights, calling your senator. That is a huge help to me and to this show and to all of us really as well. So feel free to help in that way. All right, so I think we are coming towards the end of the show. I did want to end with a few more stories that are coming from Fair Fight. So you, again, can feel motivated and inspired to stalk and call your senators and tell them that they need to pass voting rights, because we are running out of time. This is going to be the last opportunity to do this before the redistricting maps are finalized. And I think they're going to vote on them towards the end of the year, like November, December. So we only have so much time for Congress to get back in there and to pass voting rights. So please listen to these stories, and then I'll come back to wrap up the show.
I am an Army veteran, served as a combat military police officer from 2001 to 2010. I have PTSD, service connected. I suffer from severe social anxieties, paranoia, hypervigilance. During election day, there is no place for me to safely and comfortably be able to vote without being triggered with my mental health issues that I incurred from during my service in the United States Army. So I depend on early voting and absentee ballot. Standing in large crowds, standing in long lines is not an option for me, as well not an option for many veterans like me. Without it, I would not be able to vote. I served my country honorably for almost 10 years. When I took that oath to protect the rights of the Constitution, to protect the rights of these people that live in this country, I took that oath very seriously. It is my constitutional right to be able to vote. That is what I served for. My father, being from the Delta of Mississippi, was born in an era where people that looked like me was unable to vote. I was raised in a household where that's what we did, we voted. And when I took that oath to defend that right, how dare we be denied it? I gave everything for my country just for this. And now we're being stopped. There are many veterans, they'll say, well, we have ADA protections for people with disabilities. And I would say to that, but what about the veterans that didn't know how to put in a disability claim through the VA, who didn't have the help, or for whatever reason were denied, but yet they still have problems? For veterans to be able to have the access that we deserve, there are significant changes that need to be made. We need access to mail-in ballots. We need to be able to early vote, so that way we can go and feel that we are in a safe place, that we don't have to worry about standing in long lines and being in large crowds for hours waiting for our turn. When I signed up, there was no lines for me to get into the Army. So why should I and my fellow brothers and sisters in arms have to stand in long lines to cast a ballot?
Yeah, we're gonna watch another video.
In New Hampshire, voter suppression is mainly targeted at students. Of course, over the past few years, from the 2018 to 2020 sessions in the State House, there have been bills that have been pushed through or attempted to be pushed through that would change how students could vote, mostly affecting the definition of domicile, meaning that dorms would no longer be applicable on their registration forms. This, of course, is completely absurd since students live in New Hampshire for 3/4 of the year and is essentially stripping somebody who is a resident of their right to vote. It's important for me that these laws aren't passed because New Hampshire, and especially the university system, it's a community there, and these people are part of that community and they deserve to have their rights. It shouldn't be something that should be stripped away from them. but that's exactly what the state legislature is trying to do.
Okay, so let's see here. I think we covered everybody so far. Okay, so thank you everyone who has been volunteering to ask voters to share their stories. That was something I know for me that when I was volunteering with Fair Fight in 2019 and 2020, we would be out there at the polls and asking voters to please share their stories. So thank you to everybody who did that and participated in that, because this has led to this moment where we're able to hear people's stories, and this is directly going to impact the passing of voting rights, because they are sharing these stories with the senators as well as with President Biden and other decision makers. So it puts a name and a face on these voter suppression stories. And so it's absolutely important that we continue to share our stories and get it out there. It doesn't matter if you're just in Georgia or a blue state or a red state or whatever. So many people are impacted by lack of access to the ballot and having their vote counted. So again, when you go to make those calls, think about these people and these stories that you just heard. We're calling not just for ourselves, but also calling for other voters and other Americans. So again, thank you so much. I will see everybody next week for the next episode. So this is Grassroots Voices. Grassroots Voices with Robin and Friends, where community and politics meet. I'm Robin, and we will see you next week. Feel free to search the hashtag Grassroots Voices if you want to watch past episodes or find out any of our calls to action. So you can always do that on social media. So again, thank you for joining, and look forward to connecting with everybody next week, and talk soon. Have a wonderful evening.